the metrics between, quote, non-social and social are kind of getting muddy, and you could argue, as I think the presenter that we're going to have after this session will argue, that, you know, there's more and more, you know, there are not very many like ads and display ads that are non-social. So I'm going to just I'm just going to briefly introduce Janet. She's an actual social media coach. I always wonder if you wear like a sweatshirt that says "Go Team" when you get out there, for Tattoo Digital Media. And, you know, she's somebody I've known for a long time and has a very good kind of overview of the whole social media scene. So with that, I'm going to let this gang take it away. Thanks.
Okay, so social media. You know, like back in the 90s, does everybody remember the 90s? Does anybody remember the 90s? We had this thing called online community, and it was really important to us, and it was really, really hard to track. We couldn't sell it. We couldn't say to brands, you need to sign up for this online community, and you're really going to be able to talk to your users. They didn't get it. We couldn't sell it. A lot of really great companies went underwater. So now it's called social media, and times have changed, and there's actually ways to track stuff. There's actually ways to attribute a conversation back to who the originator. So we've got an amazing panel of really cool people here who work for really great companies that have some ideas about how you can do attribution. And I'm not going to get in their way. I'm just going to give them all a minute to introduce themselves, to tell you a real quick bit about what it is they do and why you should care about them. And then we're going to go to some questions from me and questions from you. So let's start. Alphabetical.
Oh. Hi, I'm Russ Fraden. I'm one of the founders. I'm the CEO of a relatively new company called Dynamic Signal. And we're really focused on building technology for brands to build and run their own communities. So as much as Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google+, all wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things for brands, as well as, you know, blogs and communities and blogs, as much as they're all wonderful things for brands, I ultimately think that any reasonable marketer in the long run is going to have their own CRM platform where they have their own 360-degree view of their customers and their fans and their followers and their influencers, and we're trying to build that.
Good morning, Doug Chavez. I'm with Radium One. We're based here in San Francisco. And what we do is we have a tool called ShareGraph, which enables advertisers to connect with their audiences across the open web based on social sharing conversations that are happening in real time. And then that connects, of course, into the Radium One ad network. So we really think about it as how do you really not only find your audience, but continually compound your audience based on real-time sharing conversations.
Right. Morning, everyone. I'm Carla Burke, Senior Vice President of Sales with Buddy Media. For those of you who aren't familiar with Buddy Media, we're a powerful suite of social tools that helps brands connect with their global customers and increase their business. We recently launched a service called Conversion Buddy, which is specifically focused on helping brands understand the consumption of content by their consumers and how that relates to various actions and conversion throughout the funnel.
Good morning. My name is Phil Mui. I run a product at Google called Google Analytics. So some of you may know we also recently purchased a number of companies in the social space. Particularly, you may have heard of a company called PostRank, based in the Toronto region. And then more recently, 2 weeks ago, we purchased a company called Social Grapple. And so Google Analytics is not well known as a social media analytics tool. But hopefully that's going to change very shortly. And so the other thing that I'm helping the company with is we have a small social network called Google+ so far. And there are a lot of analytics that are about to come out. And so we are strategizing on how to actually build that in the coming few months.
Hi, I'm Clara Shai. I'm the author of The Facebook Era and CEO and founder of Hearsay Social. Hearsay Social, for those of you who don't know, we're a software platform laser focused on distributed organizations that have a strong brand, like State Farm and 24 Hour Fitness, combined with large numbers of local representatives or branches and stores. And turns out when you're a distributed organization or a distributed brand, you have certain requirements with regard to enabling each of your locations or each of your agents. And so our software is optimized for that, and measurement from day one has been a key part of our software.
Okay, so obviously measurement's the deal, right? But we've all got really great tools. I mean, you guys probably know most of them. But let's talk about cases. Let's talk about places where you could actually say, we followed this back, we attributed it to a specific event, and how that worked. And let's start with you, Clara.
Sure, I'll show a couple examples. I mean, I think in the first phase of social media adoption, people, all of our customers are just interested in getting on social and having a solution deployed and adopted. And then quickly it becomes a question of how does this tie back to key metrics? And sales is one of them. It could be branding, it could be net promoter score, any number of key objectives for the marketer. The one that I'll talk about is over the summer, I think it was in July, we helped Farmers Insurance set a Guinness World Record for the greatest number of likes on Facebook in a 24-hour period. And the way that we did that was tapping into the power of local. Like I was saying, we're focused on these distributed organizations. Farmers Insurance has 15,000 agents across the country, and they tried running a campaign initially on the corporate page, and they received a moderate amount of success. But when they unleashed the power of local, each location to simultaneously push that same message, they were able to tap into the local social capital and local social networks. And so what we saw was a spike from 130,000 fans at 8 p.m. on Wednesday to literally 2.2 million fans by 9 a.m. the next morning. And when you think about the kind of business that insurance or a lot of retailers are in, you're really, it's a brand advertising play where you're trying to reach as many people as possible for the top of the marketing funnel, and then you push them through your conversion rates. And sure enough, we've tracked the correlation between social media activity and policies sold and referrals, and it's been extremely high ROI. The point that I'll make, though, is that when you do these correlative analysis, you can't prove causation. You can't prove that someone posted or tweeted about you and then therefore bought more, but you can show correlation, and correlation is enough to justify the social media spend.
Could you repeat the question one more time? Trying to understand.
What I'm interested in is, hello? What I'm interested in is cases. I want to know good examples of what's worked, what the strategy behind that was, and who it was.
Yeah, so let me ask, how many of you have seen the Old Spice videos over the past 6 months? Yeah. So I know this morning we are focusing a lot on Facebook, but let's not forget that social means a lot more than Facebook. In the case of Old Spice, right, over the past 6 months that you all have seen, has been considered, I guess, one of the more successful social media campaigns ever done. And the way that it's done has less to do with gimmicky things, but much more to do with interesting content that people simply wanted to just pass around. And there are, I think, several hundred Old Spice videos that were created as a result of listening to what people's reactions were while the campaigns was run. And as Clara said, it is correlated to over 15 to 20% of overall revenue sales for Old Spice. So in the case of, even though there's correlation, I think most people would agree that this 15 to 20% increase overall sales of Old Spice is probably due to the set of YouTube videos, the viral content that were generated as a result.
I think, too, that it was the buzz around the videos. Once the videos went out, right, then it was the tweets and the oh my gods on Facebook that really kept that moving and kept it going.
Prior to Radium One, I ran digital marketing at Del Monte Foods, which is a large CPG company based here in San Francisco. And one of the things we talk about, I think that Old Spice is great. And it took a brand that was fairly stale, right, and completely revamped. I mean, people in this room, or maybe not, depending on your age, think of Old Spice as a really old, it's like something your father would wear, sort of a brand. And the campaign did a great job at rejuvenating a brand and making it contemporary. But one of the things I know that they had a hard time measuring is, did it really move product off the shelf? And as a brand marketer, right, that's what, my CMO would come back and say, great, we did all these things in Facebook. Show us how it moved stacked cases, right? Because a brand manager, right, my job was to support the brand managers, and they're focused on how many more stacked cases of, whether it's dog food or cans of peas and corn, how many more of those did it sell? And the Old Spice was great, but I still think they had an issue tracking it back to sales, which is not just an issue for Old Spice, it's an issue across the entire industry.
So let me just wrap that up. So it's really correlation analysis, right? When people talk about ROI in social media, people are really kind of playing it loose and fast. It's not the same as ROI per search or per other digital channels. People give it a lot of breaks, right? It's like, oh, there's an increase in 10% in sales. Oh, therefore, my videos were successful. In the case of Old Spice, I think you can make that causation argument because for 30 years, the revenue for Old Spice has been basically stagnating. And all of a sudden, there's a 20% increase in revenue. Well, what else could it be? Other than that, sexy man in the videos.
But you're right. You're absolutely right, Doug. I think that they could have done more to prove that ROI. They could have done things like on their Facebook page, issuing some sort of coupon that you could then track in-store sales. I mean, there's a lot of ideas, and I hope that's what we're going to discuss during this panel.
Absolutely, and that's actually one of the cases that I'll be talking about, but I just wanted to comment on the Old Spice campaign because I thought it was really successful in a number of different ways, but I thought it really underscored the role of content and relevant content and the opportunity that marketers have to play with content and to be provocative and to jazz up, for lack of a better word, a brand that may be perceived as stale as an opportunity to drive awareness in new consumers. So I thought it did a great job of achieving those objectives. For the case specifically of driving sales and correlating that back to offline purchase, one of the more successful case studies, and one that I love to talk about at Buddy Media, is when we worked with a brand called Pretzel Crisps. I love food, as do a number of the people that I work with. And this is a great brand that's doing something different within the snack category. Earlier this year, they decided to launch a promotion on their Facebook page to achieve a few different goals. One, to increase awareness, as well as to drive purchase and increase their fan base. At the time that they launched the coupon, which was a $1 off coupon, they had 5,000 fans. 36 hours later, they had over 12,000 fans, and they'd also had redemption rates that were upward of 16%, which is much higher than traditional offline retail redemption rates. The engagement has continued for Pretzel Crisps as a brand. They now have over 45,000 fans and have continued to play and test with the model of coupon and engagement at the local level as well. So I think for brands who are really trying to understand the correlation and the connection between offers, discounts, and other types of promotions, whether it's for a CPG brand or an entertainment brand that's looking to drive butts and seats, or whatever the action and the conversion goal might be, being able to track that correlation and the consumer reaction, I think, is really critical to how we understand conversion and attribution moving forward.
I totally agree, and I love those. They're excellent. I can house a whole bag pretty quickly. So I can talk about the things that we did at Del Monte with brands like Milk-Bone and how we actually moved the needle on a smaller brand. Contadina. We used to joke about a can of tomato paste has pretty low engagement, right? Milk-Bone, you can understand. People that love their pets like a family member. And some of the things we've talked about here, how you use tactics within Facebook or your paid search and so forth to drive into your database, the CRM database, right? Because for a CPG marketer, that's super important because that it turns out to be an annuity of a relationship, an annuity of purchases that you can track, which is fantastic. But rather than talk about that, I think one of the things that one of the marketers who really understands the conversation economy, who really understands the data frame, is Amex. Amex gets it better than anybody, bar none. And what they get about it is how to not only use data, but where that data lives, right? And so how many people here have opted into the Link, Like, Love program, right? If you haven't done it and you have an Amex card, you need to go do it. What I think is amazing about that is how, not only I know how they can track the results of what they're doing in the social graph and how people are sharing, but they're extracting that data back out from a walled garden, Facebook, right, into their own database.
It's scary as a consumer.
It's phenomenal, though, as a consumer, right?
Well, it's phenomenal because of the deals. Because basically, Amex has all of your transaction history, and what they do is now they let you link your Facebook identity to your transaction history. So not only do they know everything that you're buying, but they know all of your social media activity.
Because of this new world where people are very comfortable talking about brands, I do want to state that of every brand I've interacted with, I had my least pleasant and most annoying social media interaction with Amex. They really managed to reach out to me and then piss me off on Twitter. So since we all like sharing things we like and don't like about brands, and we're talking about Amex, I did think I'd point that out.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm sure if you tweeted that, they would
Oh,
respond.
no,
to
I
you
did.
in
That
a
was the
positive
problem.
way.
Go ahead.
We're all going to tweet it now, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Russ Fraden, mad at Amex.
But that's the thing is, so I opted in, and I knew I was giving up all this data,
Of
but the
course.
deal was so good
Of course.
that I had to take it. It was Tory Burch. I mean, you just can't.
Right. So how awesome was it that I went and made a purchase at Whole Foods, and by the time I got to my car, there was an email that said, you just saved or you're getting a discount. I mean, that's awesome. But that's cool from that gratification standpoint that a consumer wants. But from a standpoint of understanding the world of APIs that we live in and how do you extract that value back to the marketer to really get that attribution understanding and take that data out of a place that's really not sharing a lot of data, Amex is smart to be able to extract that data and own that data
But the
on the
que-
open web.
And
The
make it
question-
relevant to you, who's
Absolute-
interested in a
absolutely.
deal or a better promotion or access to those brands and services that you're passionate about.
Yeah, well, the question for marketers, though, is do you want Amex to own that data and buy it from them, or do you want to own that yourself?
Absolutely. And this is where I think marketers have to really understand the world that they play in is not the world of FSIs and just the simple things of, and this isn't a knock to Google, but the simple things of paid search. I mean, paid search is like greens fees, right? They need to understand data and what having an API strategy means. That's huge, and that's going to change the dynamic of the business. And it's either they will disrupt or they will be disrupted.
But it's also, okay, so maybe you don't want Amex to have the data, but do you have the capability to process it? And do you have the capability to actually respond to it? Because a lot of smaller brands simply couldn't deal with that data. They wouldn't know what to do with it. Whole Foods, maybe, but where do you draw that line?
David would help them.
David would help.
Clickable would help them.
For what it's worth, we power the entire Amex small business platform for advertising. The alternate is called OMMA, and we're going straight down this road and state launching the network. So we've been doing it for the last 5 years.
Your buzz. Good to know.
So for my case study, actually, I want to go kind of much older school than Facebook. To me, one of the greatest things about this new kind of like economy is it's making really great marketers focus on the actual quality of their product, right? What Facebook is and what blogs are is really just the most effective form of advertising we've all known about forever is word of mouth marketing. And the ability, you always would tell your friend about a product that delights you. Now there's just an ability to amplify that on a much broader stage, hence Amex pissing me off in a way that they never would have in the offline world. And so I remember a great case study from the I think it was late 90s. You remember Roomba? I mean, now a lot of people have Roomba, but when Roomba first launched, they attributed 6 Roomba sales to word of mouth for every one that was bought in point of purchase, because the product was so cool and so unique that everyone that had one told their friends. And obviously that has trailed off, right? They don't sell 6 for 1 anymore. But one of the best things about it, and it's also one of the reasons, by the way, that people have a big pass, because there is no great answer other than pure direct marketing metrics. Nobody has a really good answer for attribution other than I'm going to distribute a coupon, which, look, obviously anything direct marketing works fine. You distribute a coupon on your web page or on Facebook, you can track it. that's great, and that's pretty easy. The reason social media has been getting a pass, which I think is fine and people should understand and embrace, is it's not just your marketing budget, it's your kind of word of mouth budget, it's part of brand building, it's part of servicing your customers, it's part of actually making sure they love you, to try and get them to talk more about you, and in the beginning act like you're listening to them, and ultimately actually listen to them. It's why Old Spice did such a great job. Is the first ad was cool, but really listening to the customers and really doing the interactive stuff is what took it to a whole different level. And so I think, frankly, people are going to treat social differently because it's at the kind of intersection of customer service and marketing. And the best thing about it is I think we're all going to wind up with better products and better service.
I have a question. How many people in the room are brand marketers? Okay. How many people, even if you're not a brand marketer, keep your hands up. How many people in the room have used Bases or know what Bases is? Oh, you're very lucky people. So I think part of the discussion of the problem up here is, yes, of course, DR, that's the layup. But it's the other pieces that everyone in this room is probably trying to solve as a community. And one of the problems is if you're a brand advertiser or you work in an agency, media or creative, you have to use a tool called Bases. And Bases is an old school, right, tool designed by Booz Allen, right? And it's a forecasting tool. The problem with that tool is it was done in the time of TV and radio and print. And they've adjusted the model, but it doesn't know how to really calculate for digital. God forbid, social. Social totally confuses it.
Right. I think that's a really good point. And one of the opportunities, but also one of the challenges with all of the data that's being generated right now across social and across the social web is the fact that with attribution, there's a certain algorithm and a weighting of all of the data that needs to be considered in order for that relationship between the consumer and the content to be optimized. And I think that we're still learning as an industry how to establish those attribution models in a way that can be both consistent as well as scalable and actionable for marketers. So would love, as we open it up to questions, to hear feedback from other folks in the room about how they're considering attribution models and putting them into place within their organizations.
Yeah, and I think this is a really good time to open it up to questions on that basis. So let's hear what questions you have for the panel about attribution, how you attribute, what kind of tools you use. At the end of the panel will be outside the room. You can talk to them about their specific products and companies. But let's talk about how you actually use the data. So please, step up if you've got some questions. Come on.
Do we have questions?
I have one comment in the meantime.
Right.
Russell, I agreed with most of what you said, but I don't think that attribution is limited to just coupons. So again, because of the kinds of companies that Hearsay Social tends to work with, a lot of them are retailers. They have brick and mortar locations, and the advent of everyone having an iPhone and an Android means that check-ins are only going to increase in pervasiveness. And the moment that you have someone checking in, you basically are able to converge social media, online activity with store traffic, which is a leading indicator for then in-store purchase. And I think that that is a huge area we're seeing from our customers. They're starting to see a lot of great correlation there with social media driving, especially promotions, whether they're coupon-based or not, driving in-store traffic and check-ins.
I didn't mean that as a negative, by the way. My point was that I don't think anyone should beat themselves up that most of social metrics today are based on correlation. That really my point was, that's fine, that's great. That's how, by the way, that's how Banner worked in the mid-90s, right? It will take, frankly, most of the attribution stuff gets done by brands, right? I was at ComScore in the early, when ComScore was just launching, and it really what will ultimately happen is that the brands will measure what works for them. Ultimately, that will leak out, and that will find its way into models, and that will find its way into vendors. And so I think that's all great. I know any given brand probably has a very good idea of what a check-in is worth to them. They're just not going to tell us.
Yeah. Well, I think that's true. And actually, a decade ago, I worked at Google, too. And if all these metrics that we take for granted, like click-through rate and conversion, those were invented by us, by Google, by people like everyone in this room. And so I think the same thing is going to happen this era where we're going to see these new interactions, new engagement, and we'll figure out what the new metrics are that we need to track, whether it'll be this this era's version of the click-through rate.
Totally agree. And, and absolutely, coupons are easy. I know there's, Levi's is I think, in the room today. And I don't think I've ever seen a Levi's coupon, right? So a lot of people, a lot of brands in the retail space, in the not packaged goods space, in the retail space, may not do a lot of couponing, right? There's already enough pressure on that business as it is. So that's not necessarily the one. Check-in data is good, but I think one of the things that we all alluded to, we've talked about ComScore and Google. If Jan Fulgoni was up on stage, the chairman of ComScore, he'd be talking about the click-through rates that continue to just go off the cliff south, right? The majority of the clicks that happen on the internet are done by a very, very small segment of folks. It's like 5% or less. But I think if you look at the insight of how consumers behave online on the open web with social media and how they have become habituated to doing two things. I like it, I share it. And the research is already showing that consumers are more apt to like and share something before they even click on an ad. And what we do, for example, this is a total shameless plug, but it's absolutely true, is what we do at Radium One is we add a social overlay to our ads if the brands wanted. And quite honestly, a lot of the brands didn't want it at first because they thought it was going to cannibalize their click-through rates. Because everyone's focused on the click-through rate as the ultimate arbiter of success, and it's not. Right? You're not going to click on an ad and go buy a can of peas, a box of Milk-Bone. Right?
Yeah, the problem with the click-through rate was that it was very focused on that single transaction. You're optimizing for that moment and the person
right.
going through to conversion. What the like relationships and the verb relationships and follow relationships let brands do is take a longer term view, and instead of optimizing for Ronnie's click through today, we just want Ronnie to click through and engage with us over time so that when he does want to buy the can of tomato sauce, he thinks of my brand.
And that's exactly it. So one of the things that, it's great that you can like and you can share things within a closed network, but to take that data of liking and sharing and look at that and understand that across the open web and to use that to compound and build your audience, that's massive. And that's hugely disruptive. That's one of the things that we bring to the market for our advertisers, and why, by and large, most advertisers that are working with Radium One are now using this like and share feature because it is helping them find the people they need and get them to take the action.
I want to just also just reiterate this point that Doug just made. Since we are talking about coupons and almost last click kind of a attribution in a certain way, it is kind of the wrong angle to look at social media. Right? So for many of us, social media is really a upper funnel kind of a channel. And so when you actually focus on the very last click, look, probably the conversion rate is 0.1% or less, right? So if you use that as a metric to evaluate how good your coupon is, it's really the wrong thing to focus on. Instead, so there are many tools now, right? So even though we talk about these old school tools back 10 years ago, there are tools today that will help you create some kind of perception about what is the value of social. So within Google Analytics, we recently debuted multi-channel funnels that some of you may have heard of. But it is not about click-through on a social media channel directly, but it is that we help you understand over your 10 visits to a given website, if you ever come in from a social media channel, we let you know that, even though your last click came directly to a site. And so let's not forget that social is just one channel among hundreds that exist, and there are tools out there that are increasingly being developed to help you understand the value or the role that social should play, which for most brands should not be about the last click.
Yeah, and just to add that, I think one area of like the next 12 to 18 months, one thing that's really exciting to me personally and Hearsay is social media, I think, is going to expand from being upper funnel only to conversion. Because if you think about how social is merging with e-commerce or merging with search, all of a sudden you do have the ability to track transactions and conversions. And you can just imagine, call it a year from now, your daughter does this Google search for digital camera, and instead of seeing generic digital cameras, she sees, a pink one with Hello Kitty on it. or your friend who's a professional photographer searches for digital camera. Because we have real name identity, their results will be professional digital cameras, not the Hello Kitty one or not a general consumer one.
Yeah, I totally agree. The ability for marketers to leverage the social graph with the interest graph for social commerce over the next 12 to 16 months, I think is going to be phenomenal, and the implications for marketers are going to be abundant. The role of sponsored stories, as one example, as a tool, combined with the changes that Facebook is making with the Open Graph, are going to allow for greater sharing and discovery of those recommendations, and it will be interesting to see how marketers continue to leverage that. So,
And talk about being afraid of American Express.
Well, I think what's great is what we're all talking about up here, at least from I guess one perspective I have, is innovation and iteration. Right? To better figure this problem out that everyone in this room is trying to solve, you have to be able to use multiple data points to go up the funnel to ultimately understand what happens at the bottom. Because right now, the vast majority, if you go out there, with the DSPs and so forth, everyone's focused on the bottom, right? And they're all standing in a circle, shooting each other, spraying and praying, trying to figure it out. And it's not making the results any better. So you've got to really understand what's happening in this conversation that's happening across the open web. Absolutely.
Okay, so real quick, starting with you, Russ, favorite tool that isn't yours that you use for monitoring? Mine's PostRank, by the way.
Trying to think, we use a baby monitor.
That's social?
Yeah, there you go.
Well, in the past week, especially this morning around 5:30, it was the USGS .gov website telling me that indeed we did have a 3.9 magnitude earthquake, the third in less than a week.
I felt it this morning, believe me.
I actually downloaded the app, the USGS app, this morning.
It's good. It's good. I think my favorite tools right now, and the ones that I recommend to marketers, of which they're obviously very popular, are the listening tools, which I think are just continuing to increase in complexity and sophistication for monitoring sentiment. But the natural language processing technology tools that are becoming adopted and delivered at scale, I think, are creating enormous opportunities for marketers to truly tap into the conversation, the tone, and the extent to which their consumers are discussing and engaging with their brands.
I really like PostRank for a lot of reasons. So let me say what kind of tools I don't like. I don't like all the sentiment analysis tools out there today. Every one of them say you have 30% positive, 20% negative, 50% neutral, which is not very helpful. But let me say why I like PostRank. PostRank is interesting because it allows you to zoom in on a specific content of interest. So raise a hand. How many of you heard of PostRank before? Okay. Oh, how many of you used PostRank before? Okay, so a number of you. Good. So what differentiates it from most listening tools out there is rather than focusing on a set of keywords or variations of keywords, right? It actually say, hey, for this piece of content that you have generated, what are the conversations that are about it? So it's very, very specific. So in terms of attribution, it is not perfect, but it is about as good as anyone can get in this world. So if you think that because Google bought it, so it will point you to why how we would like to think about social media and the direction that Google Analytics probably would go in the next 6 months.
My favorite tool, and it isn't because I'm sitting next to Phil or that I used to work at Google, is I love Google Analytics. We use it to track our own marketing at Hearsay Social, and we also work with our customers to track it for them and make sure that they're looking at their Facebook page activity and their Facebook Connect page activity.
Great. Questions?
You have questions? Okay, I have a question, of course. So when all of this data percolates up to the CMO, and this sort of gets back to the Bases thing, because we all know that Bases is not the only tool in the world that is still really based in a very old way of doing things. And that's indicative of a mindset. It's not just about the tool, it's about the mindset of a lot of CMOs. So, I mean, I wondered kind of what credence or not you find that people at that level take, a social media attribution metrics. They may point to Old Spice, as you guys were saying at the beginning, and say, well, yeah, but you can't draw a strict cause effect here, and some people use that as a reason to discount something instead of a reason to believe in it.
Yeah, for me at Del Monte, the CMO was very open, and he listened, and he knew that Bases and all the other tools out there, in terms of what they did with digital, the signal to noise ratio was horrible. And and he and I used to have the conversation that the CMO, it's like they have a radar screen in front of them, and they have all these different pieces. The job of not the brand manager, but someone who's running all of the digital pieces across the board, listening to what 12 different brands are doing, saying these are the types of results we're seeing. Engagement's going up. The activity and the commenting on the Facebook page or the Twitter conversations, all of these things working in aggregate. And you're going to laugh out here, but one of the things we talked about at Del Monte was our WTF strategy, our website, Twitter, and Facebook strategy, right? Paid, owned, and earned media, and how all of those things work together. And we used those as a proxy for how to measure success, because we knew we couldn't get a good read on it from other places. And we used our best judgment based on solid data to say this is the percentage we should be spending in this space. And I think that's probably, for the time that we were doing this is probably the best educated way to do it.
Come on, don't we have the CMOs that don't get it story for any of you?
No, but I think first of all, we do this weird thing in the digital world, and everybody here, but I've been in the digital world 15 or 16 years. I don't think it's that CMOs don't get it. Don't forget, TV works, right? If you're a CMO and you want to keep your job, if you want to excel at your job, TV works just fine, and they have 50 years of normative data, and social's been around a couple of years, right? And even Google's only been around a small amount of time compared to TV advertising, right? And so TV works just fine, right? One of the things that drove a ton of digital spend online was actually the death of newspapers, not the growth of digital, right? It's the fact that Americans don't get newspapers anymore, so FSIs and feature ads don't work anymore because less than 20% of Americans actually get a non-Sunday newspaper, and less than 50% get a Sunday newspaper, right? So there's this big thing that the shift of dollars happens pretty slowly but pretty readily, right? I mean, the youngest CMO today was, still in their 30s when they were the internet was coming around. So I really don't meet brands ever that don't think about digital in the way you did 10 years ago. But it's what I was getting at earlier about the service piece, which is the beauty of Facebook and Twitter, is that brands that ignore digital from a marketing standpoint can't ignore it anymore because of listening and customer service, right? There's a reason that P&G, who was so slow to adopt digital in any real way, suddenly cares a ton about Facebook. And it's not because the Facebook ads work. I don't believe that for a second. It's because they can't do anything about the fact that consumers are talking about their brands en masse, and now they have to deal with it, right? And so, by the way, that's a great thing for folks in this room, because you're getting air cover that, if you remember, didn't exist in display in the 90s, right? In the 90s, it was really prove everything. And now you're getting in, which is, we hear all the time of, oh my God, I have to do something on Facebook. What? And so that's a beautiful thing, right? That probably never existed for any form of media.
I think what's actually really funny about what you said is we used to actually talk about this, that no one gets fired for making a 30-second spot. But if you do a social campaign and you do it wrong, Motrin moms, you'll get fired, right? So it's actually really funny. TV works really well. No one gets fired for making a 30-second spot, but
Except maybe the agency.
Except maybe the agency, but the brand,
bad one.
yeah, really bad. But the brand manager or the CMO, they're not going to get fired for making a 30-second spot.
But I think Russ is right. I mean, now you get fired for not doing anything, and not only are customers forcing the issue, employees are. We see this all the time, again, with our franchise and chain customers. I mean, just look at, how many of you heard of the Domino's Pizza YouTube video earlier this year? I mean, that was terrible. You had 2 employees who blew their nose and did all sorts of gross things to a pizza, while the other employee recorded it on their iPhone, posted on YouTube, went viral, got millions of views before PR team even knew about it. So just thinking about, in this new world, what do CMOs have to do preemptively and proactively?
Well, and not to really go after Ragu, but, the whole Ragu dads thing was kind of bad too. But I think that, those things stand out a lot as huge fails. But there's also the fail of putting up a Facebook page and completely ignoring it. Putting up a Facebook page because you think you have to, you don't. You don't have to have a Facebook page. If you're not going to pay attention to it.
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of brand managers who are like eager to do this, and they've heard about social, in B school or something, like, what's our Facebook strategy? What's our Twitter strategy? Facebook and Twitter are not strategies, right? They're tactics, and if anything, they're phenomenal for listening tools and engaging with the consumer, right? And at Del Monte, one of the things we brought that into our consumer affairs group immediately, and it actually helped spot issues that were happening at the plants and engage with the consumers online. And that little piece alone, that aspect of it, was hugely beneficial for the brands.
Okay, I think we have to wrap it up now. So I want to thank all of our panelists. I'm going to try to clap and hold the microphone at the same time. And so anyway, I'm going to go upstairs now. So while they're leaving, I thought I'd also mention that, the thing that really struck me about this whole chapstick thing that I alluded to,